At the heart of this idyllic community stood the Lawrence residence. For years, it had been a symbol of stability and refinement in Stonebridge. The Lawrence sisters, Isolde and Celeste, were fixtures of the neighborhood, known for their grace, intelligence, and the unshakable bond they shared. Isolde, the elder by 2 years, was a poised and ambitious corporate lawyer with sharp features and an even sharper wit. Her sister Celeste, a free-spirited artist, balanced Isolde's intensity with her easy charm and infectious laughter. Together, they were a formidable pair, admired and envied in equal measure by those around them. But the delicate equilibrium of Stonebridge was destined to be shattered by the arrival of one man, Alaric Thorne. With his enigmatic smile and air of worldly sophistication, Alaric moved into the long-vacant Holloway house next door to the Lawrences on a balmy June evening. Little did the residents of Stonebridge know that his presence would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in tragedy, forever altering the fabric of their peaceful community. As the summer heat intensified, so too did the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste, their once unbreakable sisterly bond corroding under the acid of jealousy and desire. What began as playful competition would soon spiral into a deadly game, with Alaric as the unwitting prize and Stonebridge as the stage for a chilling tale of betrayal. The Lawrence family had deep roots in Stonebridge, tracing back 4 generations to the town's founding. The parents had raised their daughters, Isolde and Celeste, with a blend of old-money refinement and new-age philosophies, resulting in 2 remarkably different, yet equally captivating young women. Isolde Lawrence seemed destined for greatness from her first breath. With her father's sharp intellect and her mother's unyielding determination, Isolde excelled in everything she pursued. By the age of 32, she had already made partner at Stonebridge's most prestigious law firm, her name whispered with a mixture of admiration and trepidation in courtrooms across the state. Isolde's life was a carefully constructed edifice of achievements and accolades. Her wardrobe consisted of impeccably tailored suits. Her social calendar was filled with charity galas and networking events, and her romantic entanglements were as brief as they were calculated. To the outside world, Isolde Lawrence was the very picture of success, but those closest to her sensed an underlying current of discontent, a hunger that no professional triumph seemed able to satisfy. In contrast, Celeste Lawrence burst into the world on a midsummer's night, her arrival heralded by a spectacular thunderstorm. From childhood, Celeste possessed an ethereal quality that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her laughter could lighten the heaviest of hearts, and her art, vibrant, emotive paintings that seemed to capture the very essence of joy, adorned galleries throughout the region. At 30, Celeste's life was a kaleidoscope of color and sensation. She flitted from one passion project to another, leaving a trail of half-finished masterpieces and broken hearts in her wake. Where Isolde was all sharp angles and cool precision, Celeste was soft curves and warm impulse. Her bohemian style and carefree attitude were at odds with Stonebridge's conservative leanings, yet somehow she made it work, charming even the most curmudgeonly of neighbors with her genuine warmth and infectious enthusiasm. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Isolde and Celeste had always been inseparable. They balanced each other, Isolde providing the stability and focus that Celeste sometimes lacked, while Celeste brought a spark of spontaneity to Isolde's regimented existence. Their sisterly bond seemed unbreakable, a fact that made the events to come all the more shocking to those who knew them. As children, they had been co-conspirators in backyard adventures and shared confidants in teenage trials. As adults, they remained each other's fiercest defenders and most trusted allies. Neither sister could have imagined that anything, or anyone, could ever come between them. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The arrival of Alaric Thorne in Stonebridge was like a stone cast into still waters, sending ripples of curiosity and excitement through the community. He appeared one day in early June, driving a sleek black Audi that purred down Maple Street with feline grace. As he emerged from the car, the Neighborhood Watch, a group of retirees who spent their days cataloging the comings and goings of Stonebridge from their porch swings, leaned forward in unison, eager for a glimpse of their new neighbor. Alaric did not disappoint. At 35, he cut a striking figure. There was something almost cinematic about his presence, as if he had stepped out of a noir film and into the technicolor world of Stonebridge. Rumors about Alaric's past spread through the community like wildfire. Some said he was a tech millionaire, taking a sabbatical from Silicon Valley. Others whispered that he was a novelist, seeking inspiration for his next bestseller. The truth, as it turned out, was equally intriguing. Alaric Thorne was a former war correspondent turned humanitarian aid worker who had spent the last decade hopscotching across global hotspots. Stonebridge, he claimed, was to be his refuge, a place to heal and write his memoirs. The Lawrence sisters first encountered Alaric separately, each meeting leaving an indelible impression. Isolde, out for her morning run, nearly collided with him as he emerged from the local coffee shop. Their eyes met over the rim of his steaming cup, and for a moment, Isolde felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Celeste's introduction came later that same day, as she was setting up her easel in the park. Alaric, out exploring his new surroundings, stopped to admire her work. His insightful comments on her use of color left Celeste both flattered and intrigued. Neither sister realized, as they recounted their encounters over dinner that night, that they had just met the man who would change their lives forever. The seeds of rivalry between Isolde and Celeste were planted innocuously enough, nurtured by the subtle competition that had always existed between them. At first, their growing interest in Alaric manifested in small ways. Isolde began taking her morning runs past his house with increasing frequency, while Celeste found reasons to paint in the park near his regular walking route. As summer progressed, both sisters found themselves unconsciously vying for Alaric's attention. Isolde, typically reserved in social situations, made an effort to engage Alaric in intellectual discourse whenever they crossed paths. She regaled him with tales of her most challenging cases, her gray eyes alight with passion as she detailed the intricacies of corporate law. Alaric, to her delight, proved to be an attentive and insightful listener, often drawing parallels between her legal battles and the geopolitical conflicts he had witnessed. Celeste, meanwhile, approached Alaric with her characteristic warmth and spontaneity. She invited him to local art exhibitions, introducing him to Stonebridge's small but vibrant creative community. On lazy Sunday afternoons, she would often spot him reading on his porch and would bound over, sketchbook in hand, to share her latest inspiration or to cajole him into being her impromptu model. Alaric, for his part, seemed to genuinely enjoy the company of both sisters, oblivious to the growing tension between them. He found in Isolde a kindred intellectual spirit, someone who could match his wit and challenge his perspectives. With Celeste, he rediscovered a sense of joy and wonder that years of witnessing human suffering had nearly extinguished. The rivalry might have remained friendly, a mere undercurrent in the sisters' relationship, had it not been for the annual Stonebridge Summer Gala. The event, a black tie affair held at the town's historic mansion, was the social highlight of the season. Isolde and Celeste had always attended together, a united front amidst Stonebridge's elite. This year, however, each sister extended a separate invitation to Alaric. When Alaric arrived at the gala, looking dashing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the Lawrence sisters' faces fell in unison. He greeted them both warmly, seemingly unaware of the silent battle of wills taking place before him. As the evening progressed, Isolde and Celeste took turns monopolizing Alaric's attention, each trying to outshine the other. Isolde dazzled him with her knowledge of wine, guiding him through a tasting with the expertise of a seasoned sommelier. Not to be outdone, Celeste swept Alaric onto the dance floor, her natural grace making even his awkward steps seem charming. By the end of the night, a palpable tension had settled between the sisters. As they watched Alaric drive away, each lost in their own thoughts, they realized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The easy camaraderie they had always shared was now tinged with an edge of competition, a silent acknowledgement that they had become rivals in the pursuit of Alaric Thorne's affections. As summer gave way to autumn, the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste intensified, their every interaction with Alaric becoming a calculated move in an increasingly complex game. The sisters, once inseparable, now found reasons to spend time apart, each hoping to encounter Alaric alone. Isolde, ever the strategist, began orchestrating chance meetings with Alaric. She adjusted her schedule to coincide with his daily routines, casually bumping into him at the local farmer's market or the quaint bookstore on Main Street. During these encounters, she would engage him in deep conversations about his experiences in war-torn countries, drawing parallels to her own battles in the courtroom. Isolde's keen intellect and sophisticated charm seemed to resonate with Alaric, and she reveled in the moments when his eyes would light up with interest at her insights. Celeste, Intuiting her sister's maneuverings countered with her own brand of seduction, she invited Alaric to impromptu picnics in the park, her basket filled with homemade delicacies that showcased her culinary skills. Under the dappled shade of oak trees, she would regale him with vivid stories of her travels through Europe's art scenes, her animated gestures and melodious laughter a stark contrast to Isolde's reserved demeanor. Celeste's free spirit and zest for life seemed to awaken something in Alaric, a yearning for the simple joys he had forgone in his years of global wandering. The competition between the sisters began to spill over into other aspects of their lives. Isolde, who had always been career-focused, suddenly took an interest in community events, volunteering for the same charitable causes that Alaric supported. Celeste, typically content with her bohemian lifestyle, started talking about getting her art into more prestigious galleries, knowing that Alaric appreciated ambition. Their friends and neighbors in Stonebridge watched this transformation with a mixture of fascination and concern. The once harmonious Lawrence sisters were now prone to thinly veiled barbs and one-upmanship, their interactions charged with an undercurrent of rivalry that was impossible to ignore. The situation came to a head at the Stonebridge Autumn Festival. Both sisters had been involved in organizing the event, each hoping to impress Alaric with their community spirit. Isolde had meticulously planned the logistics, ensuring every detail was perfect. Celeste had taken charge of the artistic elements, designing beautiful decorations that transformed the town square into a harvest wonderland. As Alaric strolled through the festival, complimenting both sisters on their hard work, Isolde and Celeste flanked him on either side, each vying for his attention. When he admired a particularly striking centerpiece, Celeste quickly claimed credit, shooting a triumphant glance at Isolde. In retaliation, Isolde smoothly steered the conversation towards the event's flawless execution, subtly highlighting her own contributions. The tension between them built throughout the evening, culminating in a heated argument behind the catering tent. Their raised voices drew concerned looks from passers-by, and even Alaric, finally noticing the strain between the sisters, attempted to intervene. His presence only served to fuel their anger, each accusing the other of trying to monopolize his time. As the festival wound down, Isolde and Celeste departed separately, their usual joint ride home abandoned. Alaric was left standing alone, a puzzled expression on his face, as he began to realize the depth of the conflict he had inadvertently sparked between the Lawrence sisters. The watershed moment in the sisters' rivalry came on a crisp October evening, during Stonebridge's annual charity auction. The event, held in the grand ballroom of the Stonebridge Country Club, was a glittering affair that drew the town's most prominent citizens. Isolde and Celeste arrived separately, each a vision in designer evening wear, their eyes scanning the crowd for a glimpse of Alaric. When Alaric finally appeared, looking debonair in a classic black tuxedo, both sisters made their move. They converged on him from opposite sides of the room, their forced smiles barely concealing their competitive intent. Alaric, now acutely aware of the tension between them, attempted to greet both equally, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken hostility. As the auction began, Isolde and Celeste found themselves locked in a silent bidding war. The item up for bid was a weekend getaway for two at an exclusive mountain resort, an opportunity that both sisters saw as a chance to spend uninterrupted time with Alaric. The bidding started reasonably, but quickly escalated as Isolde and Celeste raised their paddles with increasing frequency. The other attendees watched in astonishment as the price soared well beyond the package's value. Alaric, realizing the bid was more about him than the prize, tried to intervene, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The sisters were too engrossed in their competition to heed his discomfort. In the end, it was Celeste who won the bid, her final offer eliciting a collective gasp from the crowd. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, Celeste turned to Isolde with a triumphant smirk, only to find her sister's face a mask of cold fury. Isolde, typically the picture of composure, was visibly shaking with rage. In that moment, something shifted in Isolde's eyes, a hardening, a darkness that sent a chill down Celeste's spine. Without a word, Isolde turned on her heel and strode out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of whispers in her path. Alaric, witnessing this exchange, finally grasped the full extent of the sisters' rivalry. He approached Celeste, his face etched with concern, and gently suggested that perhaps it would be best if he kept his distance from both of them for a while. Celeste, Her victory suddenly hollow, could only nod mutely as she watched him walk away. As the evening drew to a close, the residents of Stonebridge buzzed with speculation about the Lawrence sisters' very public falling out. Little did they know that this was merely the prelude to a much darker chapter in the sisters' story. In the days following the charity auction, Isolde retreated into herself, her usual routines abandoned in favor of long hours spent alone in her home office. To the outside world, it appeared that she was merely nursing her wounded pride, but within the confines of her mind, a sinister plan was taking shape. Isolde had always prided herself on her self-control, her ability to compartmentalize emotions and approach problems with cool logic. But the humiliation of losing to Celeste, coupled with the fear of losing Alaric, had cracked her carefully constructed facade. For the first time in her life, Isolde found herself entertaining thoughts that both thrilled and terrified her. At first, these thoughts were relatively innocuous, fantasies of Celeste falling ill or encountering some minor misfortune that would keep her away from Alaric. But as the days wore on, fueled by sleepless nights and an increasing sense of desperation, Isolde's imagination took a darker turn. She began to contemplate scenarios in which Celeste was permanently removed from the equation. These thoughts, initially shocking in their intensity, gradually became more palatable as Isolde's mind worked to justify them. She convinced herself that Celeste had always been the favored sister, the one who effortlessly captured attention and affection, while Isolde had to work tirelessly for every scrap of recognition. In her distorted reasoning, Isolde began to see Celeste not just as a rival for Alaric's affections, but as the embodiment of everything she had ever resented in life. Every setback, every disappointment, every moment of self-doubt, Isolde now attributed them all to Celeste's mere existence. The turning point came on a rain-soaked evening, as Isolde sat in her darkened living room, a glass of wine in hand. Through the window she caught sight of Celeste and Alaric, sharing an umbrella as they walked down the street, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. Something snapped inside Isolde at that moment. The last vestiges of sisterly affection crumbled away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was then that the idea of an accident first took root in Isolde's mind, an unfortunate incident that would rid her of Celeste once and for all, leaving the path to Alaric clear. As lightning illuminated the room, Isolde allowed herself a small chilling smile. She was, after all, an expert in constructing airtight cases. Surely she could craft the perfect crime. With the decision made, Isolde threw herself into planning with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her such a formidable lawyer. She approached the task of eliminating her sister with the clinical detachment of a chess player, plotting several moves ahead. Her first step was to establish an alibi. Isolde began to cultivate a more visible presence in the community, volunteering at the local animal shelter and joining a book club. She made a point of being seen and heard, creating a network of witnesses who could vouch for her whereabouts and character. Simultaneously, she embarked on a careful study of Celeste's routines. Under the guise of reconciliation, Isolde began to spend more time with her sister, noting her habits, her schedule, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. She paid particular attention to Celeste's daily jog through Stonebridge Park, a solitary ritual that Celeste had maintained for years. Isolde's research extended beyond her sister. She spent hours poring over medical journals and forensic reports, learning about accidents that could appear natural, yet be orchestrated. She became an expert in the effects of various substances, their detectability, and their ability to mimic natural causes of death. To cover her tracks, Isolde used public computers at the local library to conduct her more questionable searches, always careful to clear the browsing history afterward. She made discreet purchases from different stores across town, accumulating the materials she would need, without raising suspicion. As her plan crystallized, Isolde encountered several close calls that threatened to derail her scheme. Once, while she was mixing a concoction in her garage, a neighbor dropped by unexpectedly. Isolde managed to conceal her work just in time, her heart pounding as she chatted casually over coffee. Another time, Celeste nearly discovered a notebook where Isolde had jotted down some incriminating notes. Isolde managed to snatch it away, passing it off as a draft for a sensitive legal case. The incident served as a stark reminder of the need for absolute caution. Despite these near misses, Isolde's resolve never wavered. If anything, the close calls only served to sharpen her focus and refine her plan. She became adept at maintaining a facade of normalcy, playing the role of the dutiful sister and respected community member while secretly orchestrating Celeste's demise. As weeks turned into months, Isolde's plan evolved into an intricately woven tapestry of deception and calculation. Every detail was accounted for, every possibility considered and recalculated. In her mind, it was no longer a question of if she would act, but when. The opportunity Isolde had been waiting for finally presented itself on the eve of Stonebridge's annual marathon, an event in which Celeste had enthusiastically participated for years. With a sense of grim satisfaction, Isolde realized that the stage was set for her carefully choreographed accident to unfold. The morning of the Stonebridge Marathon dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for running. Isolde awoke early, her nerves humming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She went through her morning routine with mechanical precision, each action carefully planned to establish her alibi. At 7:30 a.m., Isolde arrived at the marathon starting line, clipboard in hand. She had volunteered as a race coordinator months ago, securing herself a visible role in the day's events. She greeted fellow volunteers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her gaze constantly scanning the growing crowd for a glimpse of Celeste. Celeste arrived at 8:15 a.m. She waved enthusiastically at Isolde, any lingering tension between them seemingly forgotten in the pre-race atmosphere. Isolde waved back, her stomach churning as she thought of what was to come. As Celeste warmed up, Isolde made her way to the water station at the 5-mile mark, where she had been assigned to distribute refreshments to the runners. This position was crucial to her plan. It allowed her to be seen by numerous witnesses while still giving her access to the race route. The starting gun fired at 9 a.m. sharp. Isolde watched the sea of runners surge forward, her eyes fixed on Celeste's retreating form. Then, with a deep breath, she turned her attention to her duties, handing out cups of water with mechanical efficiency. At 9:47 a.m., Isolde excused herself, citing a need for a bathroom break. Instead, she hurried to a secluded spot along the race route, just before a sharp turn that led into a wooded area. Here, she retrieved a small vial from her pocket and carefully spread its contents, a nearly invisible, highly slippery substance, across a patch of the path. Returning to her post, Isolde resumed her role, her heart racing as she awaited Celeste's approach. At 10:23 a.m., she spotted her sister rounding the bend towards the water station. Celeste was making good time, her face set in determination as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met for a brief moment, as Isolde handed Celeste the water. In that instant, a flicker of doubt passed through Isolde's mind, a last vestige of sisterly affection crying out in protest. But it was too late to turn back now. Celeste continued on, oblivious to what lay ahead. Isolde watched, her breath caught in her throat as her sister approached the treacherous patch of ground. Time seemed to slow as Celeste's foot made contact with the slippery surface. The accident unfolded exactly as Isolde had planned. Celeste's foot slid, her ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. Her momentum carried her forward, sending her careening off the path and down a steep embankment. The sound of breaking branches and a muffled cry echoed through the woods, followed by an ominous silence. For a moment, Isolde stood frozen, the reality of what she had done crashing over her. Then, snapping back to her senses, she raised the alarm, her anguished cries for help convincingly real. As fellow volunteers and paramedics rushed to the scene, Isolde played the part of the distraught sister to perfection, her eyes brimming with tears that were not entirely feigned. As Celeste's motionless form was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Isolde felt a strange mix of horror and relief. The deed was done. Now, all that remained was to see her plan through to its bitter end. The news of Celeste Lawrence's tragic accident sent shockwaves through Stonebridge. The vibrant artist, beloved by many, had suffered severe head trauma and multiple fractures in her fall. She lingered in a coma for 3 days before succumbing to her injuries, leaving the community in mourning and disbelief. The initial investigation into Celeste's death was cursory. Given the public nature of the event and the presence of numerous witnesses, the police were inclined to view it as a tragic accident. Isolde's performance as the grief-stricken sister was flawless, her composed exterior cracking just enough to reveal glimpses of raw emotion that seemed genuine to all who saw her. In the days following Celeste's funeral, a somber affair attended by what seemed like the entire town, Isolde threw herself into managing her sister's estate. She handled the tasks with her usual efficiency, all the while playing the role of the bereaved sibling to perfection. The first thread in Isolde's carefully woven tapestry of deception came loose 6 months after Celeste's death. Amelia Thornton, a junior associate at Isolde's law firm, was tasked with organizing old case files when she stumbled upon a peculiar notebook hidden among Isolde's papers. Curiosity piqued, Amelia flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she realized the sinister nature of its contents. The notebook contained detailed notes on various poisons and their effects, along with what appeared to be a meticulously planned timeline. While no names were mentioned, the final date corresponded chillingly with the day of Celeste's fatal accident. Unsure of what to do with this information, Amelia confided in her boyfriend, Detective Lucas Reeves. Reeves, a by-the-book officer who had always felt uneasy about the quick resolution of Celeste's case, saw this as an opportunity to reopen the investigation. He began by quietly re-examining the evidence, paying particular attention to details that had been overlooked in the initial inquiry. A breakthrough came when Reeves interviewed Martin Holloway, a retired chemist who lived near the accident site. Holloway recalled seeing Isolde near the wooded area shortly before Celeste's fall, despite Isolde's insistence that she had been at the water station the entire time. This discrepancy, coupled with the suspicious notebook, was enough for Reeves to dig deeper. As the investigation progressed, more inconsistencies in Isolde's story came to light. Security camera footage from a nearby convenience store showed Isolde purchasing unusual combinations of chemicals in the weeks leading up to the marathon. A forensic re-examination of Celeste's running shoes revealed traces of an artificial polymer designed to reduce friction, a substance that had no business being on a running trail. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Alaric Thorne, racked with guilt over his role in the sisters' rivalry, came forward with a series of text messages from Isolde. The messages, sent in the heat of their competition for his affections, revealed a level of animosity toward Celeste that bordered on obsession. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the true picture of what had transpired on that fateful day began to emerge. Isolde's carefully constructed alibi began to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence. The final nail in the coffin came during a search of Isolde's home office. Hidden behind a false panel in her desk, detectives discovered a vial containing traces of the same polymer found on Celeste's shoes, along with a series of detailed notes outlining the plan to stage an accident during the marathon. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against her, Isolde's composure finally shattered. In a moment of desperation, she attempted to flee, leading police on a tense car chase through the streets of Stonebridge. The pursuit ended at the very spot where Celeste had fallen, with Isolde's car skidding off the road in a cruel twist of irony. As she was led away in handcuffs, the mask of the grieving sister fell away completely. The residents of Stonebridge watched in shock as Isolde Lawrence, once a pillar of their community, was revealed to be the architect of her own sister's demise. The arrest and subsequent confession of Isolde Lawrence sent shockwaves through Stonebridge, shattering the town's idyllic image and forcing its residents to confront the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of their community. The courtroom drama unfolded like a twisted mirror image of Isolde's legal career, with the once respected lawyer now sitting at the defendant's table. Her impassioned plea of temporary insanity, citing the extreme emotional stress of her rivalry with Celeste, fell on deaf ears. The jury, comprised of many who had once admired her, took less than a day to return a guilty verdict. She was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole.